Hi, Yolanda. It is such an honor and privilege to be able to have you answer some questions for us for our University United Methodist congregation and the students. And let me just introduce you a little bit. I know you're a humble person, but your accomplishments, they precede you. So Yolanda Nava is an Emmy award-winning broadcast journalist, columnist, and author who has appeared on NBC, CBS, PBS, cable TV station in Los Angeles, Sacramento, nationally. She is the author of the best-selling award-winning book, It's All in the Frijoles, which is published by Simon & Schuster. In 2009, Yolanda suddenly lost sight in both eyes. And yet she continues to inspire and to empower others through her writing and her speaking. Yolanda, are you ready for a couple of questions?
I'm ready for a couple of questions, and they're good questions, Frank.
Good.
Very thoughtful.
I'm glad you like them. Your story is just such an amazing story. Your life is such an amazing life, and so. When I read the foreword of your new book, Through the Dark, by Dr. Pirro, who has been your personal physician, he shared his amazement that you did not even flinch, that you were able to accept your new situation of blindness and move forward with adapting to the challenges. But reading your book, I know that you weren't like comfortable at all times. There were times when you were scared. And I want to quote this with your permission from your book, this one paragraph that really struck me, where you said, "One night I was trying to navigate to the bathroom. I felt my way with the left hand when I lost my shoreline and went tumbling through an open door, piling into a track of clothing. Where am I? Is this a closet? I thought this was the guest bedroom. Disoriented, I panicked, and I distinctly remember the level of fear that had come over me, an unnerving feeling that I had never experienced previously, helplessness." Yolanda, tell us more about these totally understandable feelings and how you found the strength to overcome them.
Yes, I had those moments. I've had several of them, actually, but you don't stay there, Frank. You have to shift the thought. You have to shift where you are and take 10 deep breaths and smile and feel, the presence of who you really are. We have to reconnect with who we really are. That's one of the big messages I think I carry throughout the book. But yes, there were moments like that.
Another question I have is, while you were going through your medical challenges, you were also trying to cope and adapt to a new reality, and that was the separation from your husband and actually a somewhat messy divorce. You felt unsafe at times. You describe in your book, you lost your home because of this domestic situation. And you expressed those feelings so adequately. I want to read another quote. You said, "I feel displaced, like a duck out of water. I miss my home, my garden, my precious cats, everything familiar and known. I often feel thirsty. Water does not satisfy me. I feel like as if I'm astray and alone in the desert, wandering in a dark, unfamiliar place, lost in a maze, a labyrinth from which I could not exit. I often feel as if I'm living in a foreign land where I don't speak the language." Now, with all of that you faced.
And that was a night after I had a very bad dream, and I share that dream in the book. And then I was talking to a friend who I love dearly, who's a mentor, a friend, a teacher to me, a very spiritual and wise woman. And she's deceased now, Janet. And so I was describing to her that desert, that place where I was, in a chapter I originally was going to call Dark Night of the Soul. But it is not a dark night of the soul. It's a dark night of the mind. And the way out of that was to let go of resistance. I was in resistance to that place. Oh boy, it was just so hard to be there. And in a foreign space, imagine yourself in the desert, not knowing where you're going. And so it's the book carries a lot of, you're moving through different situations. And that's why it's called Through, because it's important to move through those times of fear and terror and trauma and resistance. I wrote 3 poems that are at the back of the book that I decided to put in at the very last moment before publishing. And one of the poems describes that sense of terror, the fear, the resistance, feeling like you're fighting the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse at the same time. And then the second poem is realizing that I came through the light. I discovered the light again. And it moves back and forth. And that's the human condition. We can move through. But so often we get stuck. And for the 9 months I was there, I was in a lot of stuck. I'm used to being in control. And the one thing I've discovered in this situation of the blindness, I call it the blindness, it's not me, is that I've had to learn how, for me, the growth was learning how to accept help and to be able to receive it. That for me was the growth, not saying, don't touch me, I can do this myself. And so it's that was a great learning curve for me. And I'm glad I got there during the training program, and I continued to not do everything the way I was told to do it in that program, because I knew it was antithetical to who I am and who I choose to be. And life is like that. It takes us up, it takes us down. How do we move through it with grace? And that's always the goal.
Thank you for that. I think that's helpful for all of us. We all have to learn how to ask for help when we need it, accept it graciously, network with people. But the next question I have is maybe a little bit more emotional. In her praise of you, Denise Chavez mentions that you call upon the ancestors and family in your new book during your struggles along the journey. And with your permission, I'd like to read another part of your book that fascinated me in this regard, an imaginary conversation with your mom. And here you wrote, your mom said to you, "Do not be afraid, Mijita. Fear is false evidence appearing real." And you responded, "I hear you, Mama. Fear will not get me through this." Yolanda, I want to know more about how you drew from the wisdom of your mom and perhaps other ancestors or family members. Is that something that you have to deliberately think about and remember and do, or do those memories just come to you? Do you have to open yourself up to them in some way? Can you help us answering those questions?
Well, that's a big question. And that night, there were many nights like that. This is right after I went into the hospital. And when you said those words coming from my mother, I felt like I was going to start tearing up, because yes, drawing upon that was was a painful time. And I was taught that fear, F-E-A-R, is false evidence appearing real. We need to know that. It tells us that in the Bible. But we dwell on fearful thoughts, and then we get stuck in fearful thoughts, and then we live our lives based on fearful thoughts, instead of just moving through them and looking at what is the truth here. And the truth was that I am a creation, a perfectly healthy, well creation of God, a Father, Mother God, an all-knowing, all-loving Father, Mother God. And I have to align with that knowledge, that truth. And that's what I was doing in the hospital without realizing it. I did it naturally because I drew upon my mother's teaching and what I'd learned. Maya Angelou spoke at the All Saints Episcopal Church that I used to attend when I was in Pasadena. And this is decades ago when I was living there. And Maya Angelou spoke one day, and basically she said, we've already been paid for. We can draw upon our ancestors. They've already, done they paid the dues for us. We could draw from their strength, from their experiences, from the good, bad, and the ugly that they have experienced in order to bring us to this point in time in our own lives. So I think that's what was happening too, that I was connecting with what I learned with ancestral history. And what I read now, it's all of the frijoles audially, which is now available for the blind and physically handicapped through the Talking Book program. I realized how much spirituality was in my first book. And these are things that I learned from my mother, and that I included poetry and songs and stories. But all of that is part of my genetic blueprint. The indigenous spiritual values of the indigenous people of the Americas, the St. John of the Cross, and the strong Christianity Catholicism of Spain that was brought to the Americas. And so all of that is part of who I am. It's all part of who we all are. We're not just this point in time. And we can tap into all of that. You asked how. It's not an action. I don't say I'm going to sit down and have this experience. It's when I'm open, when I'm meditating, when I'm praying, when I'm emotionally in need of something. If I'm quiet with myself, then those thoughts come. In the nights at the hospital, those thoughts came in abundance, and it saved my life.
Wow, that is deep. That is wisdom right there. Yolanda, even while you were dealing with your own pressing challenges, you were still concerned about others. In your new book, at one point, you describe how you noticed that people were uncomfortable around you, not sure how to be and act around their suddenly blind friend. And you describe in your book how you deliberately practiced together with your friend Julie how to make eye contact with people when you're actually blind. Can you tell us more about this, and perhaps tell us how sighted people can be more at ease?
Well, Julie saw right away what my needs were going to be. She knew I was on a board of directors and we were opening a new cultural center in Los Angeles, La Plaza de Cultura y Artes. And she said, when you go to those meetings, people will be uncomfortable because they're not used to you being blind. And so we practiced, her moving around the table and my keeping up with their voices and their movements so that I would know where they were and I could respond and make them feel more comfortable. And it was really interesting because as I move around the world myself, I discovered some people are terrified of blindness. Oh gosh, one girlfriend said to me, if I lost my sight, Yolanda, I'd go into my bedroom, close the door, and never come out again. And I said, no, you wouldn't. You'd have to move through it. And you know what? She had a major cataclysmic, a series of 2 accidents, actually, and long story short, she was in bed, I think, for close to 2 years, recovering from her falls and breaks and all that. And she had to get back to exercising. She had to learn how to walk again. She had to learn how to move again, all of that. She's now working. She's in her 80s. That's not easy to do at that stage of life, but she's done it. So we have tremendous resilience when we draw upon it and we don't give up and we don't go to that place of, oh, poor me, poor me, poor me. It's not poor me. Just get over it, move through it. You don't have to stay there. It's a choice. We could choose how we respond to any event, any situation. And we could do it with self-love and compassion, or we could do it with anger and resistance. I've done it both ways. Let me tell you, love and compassion is the better way to do it.
So this is what Julie says. I am your support, but you are my inspiration. You are doing everything as you have always done. You are not a blind woman, Yolanda, but a woman who happens to be blind. You are not blindness. You are a presence of inspiration. You are modeling how people who have experienced trauma can move forward. That expresses so much about you, Yolanda, and what you are all about. Yolanda, in your book, you also describe the fascinating spiritual journey your medical challenges inspired you to pursue. You drew from your own local church. You went to a spiritual retreat in a Buddhist monastery. You learned from a Hindu guru, and you even traveled to Brazil to learn from John of God personally. And this following quote intrigued me especially. You write, "I was blind to many things before losing sight. I have to look at my own responsibility in all of this, and fairly early on, I asked the question, to what am I blind? It took the blindness to wake me up and to see more clearly, to see with greater discernment many things. So loss is gain. With the loss of my physical sight, I became more aware of my spiritual presence." Can you tell us more about this fascinating spiritual discovery that you made, especially when it comes to the distinction you make again and again in your book about the different realities of the body and the spirit?
I think it's been cumulative, Frank. I was fortunate to be raised by a mother who was very spiritually aware and very wise. And I studied various religions and philosophies over the course of my life. All of these teachings, and going back to Vedanta, the Katha Upanishads, the Buddhism, Sufi thought, and Islam, Judaism, Christianity, indigenous religions, it's all teaching basically the same thing. And it's love your creator, do good, be good. They each have different practices that they emphasize, but the teachings are very foundational, and they all are based around compassion and love. And so this is where we can change and modify and adapt and correct our thinking and our behavior to be more loving and more compassionate, to really live the principles of whatever faith tradition we're involved in. They're very similar. I love Houston Smith's work, and he wrote a book that I keep rereading, Frank, The World's Religions. And I go back forward. I reread Islam. I love the Sufi. I love Rumi's poetry. Read Rumi's poetry. It's very healing, very full of love. And all of these traditions teach something. And Houston Smith brings it to you from the inside out, not judging, not comparing, not trying to make one better than the other. It's just, he just gives it to you, like giving you rich spiritual food. And so that has been very important in my growth process. And then just something as simple as learning not to gossip, not to think negative thoughts. Very simple. Why can't we do that? But people hang on to the gossip and poor me this, that. And then you get stuck there. And so we need to empower ourselves by really developing whatever spiritual tradition we value, we have been raised in, or that we moved into, or that we're looking for, until we find one that feels good to us and helps empower us and helps us feel that direct connection with our Creator by whatever name we call her. I love that, and people kind of laugh when I say that, but it has to be a mother, father, Creator. God gave the Israelites through Moses. Wow, the Red Sea breaks open. They cross. It's very much a metaphor. They cross over into a new way of thinking and living by trusting God. So, we have to do that too. And whatever tradition we draw from, I was raised as a Christian, we draw from it and we take power in it, but we've got to live it. We can't just sit and think we're getting it just because we go to church on Sunday.
You know what? I absolutely love in this respect where, you talk about choices we make. I absolutely love the analogy you used in your book. And with your permission, I want to read this real quick because this is so deep. This is so good. We're all traveling down a multiple lane highway. We can travel in the slow lane, the fast lane, or the express lane. Perhaps we want to get off and take the frontage road or a charming country back road to our destination. You know how we can move from one lane to lane? It is like this with being in body or in your spiritual lane. Love this. Absolutely love this.
Well, that was a brilliant, I have to say, a brilliant insight that I got, but it was thanks to a videographer who said, I don't understand what you're talking about. I don't understand the unseen, okay? And so how do we explain that to other people? So I had to come up with some way of expressing what I was trying to convey. And I came up with that, and I called him back and I said, I got it. I've got a metaphor for you. And I loved how that turned out. And it's a very realistic. We don't see electricity, but we know when we flip the switch, the power is going to go on or off, unless the systems are down. We trust, Amazon. You go online and you order something, you put it in the shopping cart, and you know that it's going to arrive. Why can't we do that with our faith? We can heal ourselves. We do get what we think about, what we give attention to. And that's why we want to stay out of the negativity, out of the resistance, out of the self-pity, the drama, the repetition of the same old stories over and over and over again. We want to move into the power and the faith that is available to us in whatever tradition we belong to. It's the more I read, my daughter's now sending me scriptures every day. She likes the New World Bible. I'm used to the King James, and I still like much of the way it phrases things. I love that faith is a substance of things unseen. That's King James. And it is. And now we're learning from quantum physics that it's all one, and the observer determines what is seen. And aren't we seeing this in our body politic? Because many of us are seeing what's right there on the camera in front of us, and many of us are not. So I was very grateful for, the decision that was made yesterday. I'm just so grateful that I was praying for that. I didn't even turn on the TV until 6 o'clock at night, but I was praying and knowing that discernment had to be present in that, the way the case was handled, and in that jury who was going to make a decision. And thank God they made the decision. They did.
Yes.
So we do that.
We all celebrated that, Yolanda. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. Go ahead.
No. It is, there is a power in prayer, in affirmative prayer, spiritually affirmative prayer. And it's in the Bible. Jesus talked about it all the time. And how often do we go back to those phrases and those sentences and live them ourselves? He was a way shower. I was taught Jesus was a way shower. And he models how we can live, how we can think, love one another. Why is that so hard? Why? You're a minister. I mean, we could talk about that forever. But we just need to really absorb what the principles that we think we believe really are telling us to do and be. And that is our challenge, and that is what we can choose to do and what we must do to move forward in these very difficult and challenging times.
Yolanda, thank you so much for that. You've been a great preacher. I'm serious. You're preaching it. You're preaching the message of Jesus. That's wonderful. I want to change my last question. Actually, we did have an interesting one, but given the fact that I work at the University UMC, and that we have a number of young students here, do you have a word for them? For these young students that are getting ready to get their career in place and enter the workplace in this world, do you have a word of wisdom or a word of advice for them?
I have a couple. Develop yourselves, develop your character. You need skills, you need education, but real education is about building character. That's inherent in our culture. And the other thing is to have and develop faith in God by whatever name you choose to call it. And that we need a spiritual practice. The one thing I really learned in all this, getting my head knocked, after the blindness, is I got a very clear message. I needed to develop a daily spiritual practice. So what that is for each person, who's listening to this, explore that. When you have these intuitive feelings, when you experience encounters of unusual encounters, what am I being told here? What's the lesson here? When you hit a bump in the road, what's the lesson? Not for me. What's the lesson here? What am I to learn? So it's always learning. And when you're young, you're open to so many things, but be open to the right things. Make sure you're dealing in truth and in substance and in faith and in love and in compassion. And you're coming from that place. Because that's really who we are. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And we need to develop that spiritual side to really live fully and to live in our highest purpose. That's what I believe.
I just want to thank you once again, Yolanda, for coming to us and bringing your words of wisdom and encouragement and inspiration to each and every one of us here at University United Methodist Church. It's been an honor and a privilege and a joy to have you. Thank you again.
Well, it's my honor and my pleasure to be with you, Frank, and all of your congregants and people that are, observing this. We have so much potential. We just need to live into it. But thank you. This has really been wonderful. Thank you.
Amen to that.